Kia ora, my name is Courtney and I'm a PhD student at Otago and I'm going to be moderating this session. And so in the spirit of Matariki, this event is not a structured lecture. It's designed to be more of a conversation, so feel free to share your thoughts and opinions and your experiences throughout. Peter's going to have an initial kōrero, and after that we'll invite the audience to participate. And so we'd appreciate if you think of questions or any comments you have along the way. Matariki is a time for reflection, to reflect on ourselves and our connections with our ancestors, and also a time to look to the future and to build resilience within ourselves and with our whānau. And so I'll hand it over to Peter.
Tēnā koe, Courtney. I te whare o rukutia, tēnā koe. Rau rakatira mā, te hunga e mā taki ana. Tēnei te mihi, kia koutou. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm humbled to be here and at this fabulous house of rukutia, and especially so to talk on the topic of Māori men and mental health. So I warmly welcome you all here and just support the welcome we've already had. I only have a short time to talk before we have some questions, so it's very much a snapshot. When I was a youngster, I grew up a young Ngāi Tahu man with whakapapa to Ngāi Tahu on my mother's side in the village of Kāputi, which lies to the south of the township of Balclutha. I was very proud at times of my connections into Ngāi Tahu, but there were other occasions where I was much less so. I recall a number of occasions where my peers and even some adults would make very derogatory comments about things Māori that were very hurtful to me. And so I grew up not completely confident in myself or my cultural ties as a youngster. At the village of Kāputi, there's a small shop, there's a creek, a lovely beach and some forest, and that's about it. And outside that shop there used to sit an elderly Māori man called Rangi, and he would smoke his pipe. And every time without fail that I was walking up near the shop, I would see him. And Rangi would call out to me, "Tēnā koe, Peter," and I would call back, "Hello, Rangi." One day Rangi said to me, "Peter, why is it when I call out tēnā koe to you, you call back, 'Hello, Rangi'?" I apologised to the gentleman and explained that I grew up learning only English. And to my horror, he started to laugh at me and he said, so you're a tui that can only speak bellbird." And I remember being deeply hurt by that as I started to come to terms with how it felt. And I ran home that day and never forgot that engagement right through to the present time. In 2007, I went to work at Wakari Hospital here in Dunedin, supporting Māori men within their mental health as a Māori mental health counsellor. I very quickly realised that if I said kia ora to members of that community, and if my colleagues also engaged in Te Reo Māori, which I could not do, it was very profound, and we would get a different level of responding to our European friends who were in the psychiatry community. So of course I wanted to be as effective as I could possibly be, helping out my friends and fellow citizens, members of the Māori community. I set about learning Te Reo Māori as a 50-year-old man, and I became a hunter-gatherer for the language. I would go and sit at a table where I could hear elderly Māori speaking. Even if I wasn't invited, I might sit at a table close to them and start to tune in. I went to one class with the fabulous Marcia Cassidy, and I also learned some Te Reo Māori from the internet and from the television. And after a while I got reasonably good at Te Reo Māori, Far from an expert or a pūkena, but I got quite good at it. And I started to realise that it was true what the elders were saying about the language. The language is the gateway to the Māori world. Because I started to feel much more deeply connected to my whakapapa and to my tribal lands and to our tribal stories than I had before. And I couldn't really explain that in words, but I just developed this new closeness to those domains. I could walk down to the beach and talk in Te Reo Māori to the caretaker of the ocean, Takarua. I could walk up to the forest and talk to Tāne Mahuta, the caretaker of the forest, in Te Reo Māori. These were very profound developments for me. And in these more recent times, if somebody said to me something that was clumsy or inappropriate, or even outright culturally racist, I was able to deflect those comments very, very well. I didn't need to become angry. I didn't need to shout, because I was coming from the place of mātauranga, or knowledge. Learning Te Reo Māori is much more than just a language. It's very much, as the elders say, a gateway. And nowadays, I work at the University of Otago, and I'm a cultural advisor to the School of Biomedical Sciences there. And it's a fabulous position. And I'm deeply humbled to be there, because I see the science community as caretakers of the environment, wanting to care for people, wanting to care for the environment. And that lines up very nicely with kaitiakitanga of Māori, where we personify and have a very intimate relationship with the environment. It's a wonderful synergy. So I'm so pleased and humbled to be among the science community, the University of Otago. And I acknowledge the brain health research community here today as well. But most importantly, and my most profound observation, and I go back to the wonderful comments that at the time were so hurtful that Rangi made to me when he said, "Oh, you're a tui that can only speak bellbird." Rangi wasn't, he was talking about, he wanted me to speak Māori. He wasn't saying there was anything wrong with speaking English, for which he was using the term bellbird. He was really educating me that I could have both, and ought to, in the spirit of the Treaty of Waitangi. And so I go forward now with the confidence, with the knowledge, and the many blessings that come with he taonga e tuku iho, that treasure that's been handed down from the ancestors, which we refer to as Te Reo Māori. And while I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that is a panacea for all things to do with Māori men and having resilience in their mental health, I'm certainly not saying that. We need many other things to achieve that. But it is very potent and powerful in that domain. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's my kōrero today, and it's very much a snapshot, but I hope I've been able to sow a seed about the power of Te Reo Māori and supporting resilience and mental health, especially for our tāne Māori, but for all our Māori community, of course. Kia ora. I will just finish with a whakatauki that speaks to the kaupapa. Toko reo, toko oho oho, toko reo, toko māpipi maurea. So my language is the portal to my soul. I wear it like a treasured adornment. And that is the proverb that sits nicely, I think, with the discussion. So, nā mihi nui anō ki a koutou tino hariko, tanaku ki te noho tahi tātou ki raro te tuanui o te whare tūnei, ki raro te maru o Matariki, no reira nā mihi nui ki a koutou, kei a koe te rākau e Courtney, nā mihi.
Nā mihi, Peter. So I think we'll open up the floor to questions or comments from the audience. Yes?
That was a wonderful introduction, and particularly the way you began with a story, because I think us Anglo-American thinkers in both philosophy and medicine, or these philosophy of medicine, underrate stories. We focus on detached science, and that science is often in a very Pakeha or Anglo-American model, and therefore that science I have found in my travels, particularly with Canadian scholars, does not commend itself, find its way into the ways of thinking of Indigenous scholars and Maori scholars in the same way. And because it lacks that resonance, it sometimes is also shallow and misses the point of contemporary mental health and health in general. And Pakeha scholars of medical ethics and philosophy, which are my two subjects, along with neuroscience, just don't get it because their philosophical and thinking is locked into a Belbed model, not a Tui model. And the Tui model, it seems to me, has relevance not only for New Zealand, but also across the ditch for Indigenous Australians and increasingly for Indigenous Canadians who are beginning to realise they have an absolutely essential role in the North American continent because their US counterparts have been silenced for so long by contemporary neuroscience discourse.
Kia ora, Grant. Thank you very much for your kōrero, and I think I agree with you that it is wonderful to be able to enjoy the benefits of the greater awareness of First Nations views and the way in which First Nations people can add so much value even to contemporary topics such as science. And I know that we sit under the doctrine of this document, such as the Treaty of Waitangi and that document and the next one in various countries around the globe. But I really think we sit under the commonality of kaitiakitanga, caretakership, over and above the presence of those documents, not to understate for 1 minute their value and virtue, but I sometimes think some of the actual benefits at the coalface for collaboration are lost because it's easy to say, well, we do this and we do that and we engage with this group and that group because of this treaty or that document, when I think that there are so many natural benefits for engaging as well that are sometimes lost if we don't look carefully at what's on the table across the different cultures. So I mihi to your observation, Grant, and we are blessed to be in this new state and this growing state of awareness and sharing. Thank you.
Were there any other questions from the audience? Yes?
I also wanted to ask, what can the Whakapapa Pākehā or Tangata do to support this kaupapa?
The kaupapa of Te Reo would be to engage with Te Reo, because as the elders say, if you engage with Te Reo, you're entering through the gateway to the wider culture. And so you cannot, it is such a potent journey. If on one hand we're just saying, make a start to learn the language, but within that is so much wider and associated knowledge that will come your way. So I think the journey to acquire Te Reo Māori is a wonderful way forward for sharing across the cultures, and that would be how I would kind of respond to that. Thank you.
Along that line, I have a question about reaching back to your work with mental health at Wākari. How do you know about Te Reo Māori and its power to help Māori men with their mental health and building resilience?
Kia ora, Courtney. He pātai paito. It's a good question. When I was right from the get-go, I started to see how Māori men, even if they couldn't speak the language, they were affected by it. And we say the apple never falls far from the tree, so that they may have lost access to their language, but through their parents there would have been some remnants, some residue of it, and stronger going further and further back. And so naturally I think Māori have a sense that that is a portal, as we said earlier, to much wider mātauranga Māori, much wider knowledge. So they're not only tuning in to the words, but they're also starting to come to terms with the knowledge that sits within those words. And I think that's why it's so potent for the Māori community I worked with. And I think that's how I would best sum that up. Yes, just with the word potent.
Fantastic. Were there any other questions? Yes?
Kia ora. Oh, tēnā koe, John.
I just had a question. We're in a big political change today. The whole system has changed today. Doesn't feel any different right now. But do you see some positives and hopes of the Māori Health Authority and Health New Zealand for Māori mental health particularly?
Yes, I do. And tēnā koe, John. And I acknowledge change. I haven't studied the particular changes in detail that you're alluding to, but once you start to recognise and acknowledge the virtue of genuine cultural collaboration, to me it transcends change in governments, for example. Everybody's interested in an opportunity for a helping hand on their journey. And if the mainstream society in New Zealand can see what Te Ao Māori brings to the table, then there's so much value in that it makes sense to pick it up and run with it and work with it. And if you come along and you're a new party and you say, oh, we're going to not do that and we're going to not do that because we're a new political party, for example, well, you cut off your nose to spite your face, you know. So kia ora for your question, John.
Another question from the audience? Yes.
Nei rā tini ki a koe masua, aha kore te kōrero me nui te kaupapa, te hohonu e taumaha hoki.
Kia ora.
No reira, ko taki pātai māu. What are some barriers that you found learning Te Reo Māori in the South?
Oh, e pātai paito. Some barriers to learning Te Reo Māori in the South would be that you don't necessarily encounter another Māori speaker at every corner of your journey when you walk down George Street, which may be more the case in some of the more northern centres, or even if we go south, perhaps to further into Murihiku. You know, I'm not taking anything away from all the wonderful places where the Te Reo Māori flourishes in Otipoti, Dunedin, but we don't have the number of speakers or occasions to use the reo here as perhaps other centres do. So that's certainly a challenge. What I say to people is you sort of can't do the reo because you want to do it because it's a tick box or something like that. You've got to do it because you can feel the value in it and see it, because that's what will take you through, you know, on the journey. If you've got some other ulterior motive for doing it that isn't really particularly robust, then it would be more challenging. So that would be my sort of response there. We're perhaps newer to the language here than some of the other areas around the motu. Kia ora.
I had a question about your current work that you do at the university. Have you ever found any, say, pushback between your work connecting PIs or primary investigators in science and this idea of Mātauranga Māori and the value of it? And how have you bridged that gap or communicated the importance of it?
That's a good question, Courtney, and I would say that so far I've been blessed. Mostly at the University of Otago I've encountered a lot of goodwill. What I would say though, just to be completely clear, is that sometimes I have encountered folk who are not particularly confident or aware of what the collaboration would look like, and I don't hold them personally responsible for that. They're just not sure what I can bring to the table, and as we sit together and share the kōrero, there's an opportunity to say, well, we can bring this. Te Ao Māori has this view. Let's say, for example, you're exploring a type of plant that grows in a particular area, and you want to know about that plant, and you're approaching it from a science perspective. I might say to them, well, let's have a look at some of the Māori words that correspond to the location where you are harvesting and growing that plant. What are the Māori words on the signposts? If we unpack those Māori words, what do they tell us about that area? A classic one would be waiora or waimati. You know, so waiora is healthy water, waimati is dead water. So if you're researching something, let's say it's a plant that lives near the water, and you see a signpost saying waimati, then that's an old Māori term that's telling you that water has not always been particularly healthy, and so if it's not healthy now, you need not be afraid, provided it's not just because of cow manure, because it could have always been that way. So by unlocking Māori words, there's an opportunity to kickstart a science project. And as I'm able to share that kind of thinking, because every area has Māori words attached to it, scientists start to change because they realise the value in the collaboration. And so at the start, it wasn't that there was pushback, it was just a lack of awareness of how. And the other comment I would make is that sometimes people think the only basis for collaboration is the Treaty of Waitangi, which again, I think is sometimes not always used appropriately. Yes, that's important, but if you unpack the Māori culture in other ways, you're providing tangible knowledge and understanding of the value of the collaboration that is missed if you only cite the Treaty of Waitangi.
Right.
Kia ora.
Incredibly valuable. Thank you for your work. More questions from the audience? Yes?
Thank you so much for your kōrero. I was just kind of wondering, in a clinical space or a clinical interaction, what are some of the specific ways that you think using Te Reo will be most effective? So I think it must have to go beyond just greeting people in Māori and maybe dispersing a few words. What are some of the ways you think that?
Absolutely. Well, let's say you're working in a clinical setting, and it might be a clinical setting where you'll say, for example, work exploring the tinana of the body in some part. It may be the cortex or the other parts of the anatomy. If you take, for example, you only need to look at proverbs. So if you took the proverb, Hia te mea nui o te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata, and that's just the tail end of a very big proverb. But what it's saying is that people are the most important thing. It's not putting that in a negative context, it's putting it in a context of just wider awareness of what people can bring to the table through our ability to work together, through our ability to think very, very carefully and appropriately on topics. And so if you put that proverb on the table, you're automatically appealing to something from the Māori worldview that speaks to a distilled approach to a particular topic, whereby people have the power to arrive at something very, very useful going forward. And so that has value in any kind of mātauranga or education setting, I would have thought. So it's often our philosophies that are captured within our proverbs that are useful. Another one, mā te kimi ka kiti, mā te kiti ka mohio, mā te mohio ka marama. So from the looking comes the finding, from the finding comes the knowing, from the knowing comes the understanding. So it's a Māori proverb that sets out a traditional Māori viewpoint of building and progressing knowledge over a period of recognised stages. So it's not that different from what we might be doing in a lab setting, in a clinical setting, to use your term. So these are just a couple of examples of how we can bring knowledge to the table. So yes, we might start out doing a mihi and we might start out doing a karakia, but there are many, many other layers of mātauranga Māori that can support the journey. So they may be some of our initial steps, and then we can delve further.
John? Go ahead, Grant.
I was just going to remark that you mentioned the knowledge of what we might metaphorically call the heart, as well as the knowledge of what we might prefer to call either the brain or the mind. Noticing that in Māori in particular, this contrast between a holistic kind of knowledge that ropes in many different influences but cannot be strictly ordered into a scientific hierarchy or structure, needs to be set alongside the knowledge that can be so ordered in order to give you a much fuller picture of the phenomenon you're looking at.
Kia ora. Yes, that's right, Grant, and it's a good observation that you've made, and I'm very proud of the Māori language, and that was certainly one of the things that attracted me to it, in the way that it can be used, terms can be used and applied much more widely, and our culture is resplendent with examples, mostly enshrined and set out within our whakatauki, but also within our tribal stories. Of how, and I think what you've asked really goes perhaps back to the creation story, and this is important for everybody, I think, in this setting to have a sense of, and I'm sure many of you already do. We say we are whānau with the environment as people. As people, we are whānau with the environment. We are not people there and the environment there. So Papa Tuanuku Earth Mother is our living ancestor, as is Ranginui or Rakinui, our Sky Father, and Tani Mahuta, the god of the forest, Tangaroa, the god of the sea. These are living ancestors that are within our genealogy, our whakapapa. So as we start to have an understanding of the Māori worldview about that, then it opens the door to looking quite differently at the body. Because let's say we're looking at the lungs. So in the Māori world, we would say we received these lungs from the god of the wind, whose name is Tawhiri Mātia. So, and then you are looking at a discussion that connects you to the environment as a person. It speaks to your whakapapa, to the environment. And sometimes in the Western view, the environment is regarded as the domain of a Greenpeace or the local council or a particular government. But Māori say, no, we are at one with that people. There should be no divide between us, people, our interests, and the environment. We're all the same. So Māori, going back, probably wouldn't have had a medical school, traditionally speaking, because that's an isolated study of people when we are all at one with the environment. Why would we study in people any different to what we would study Mother Earth, our living ancestor? So it's about those coming together, and so that speaks to the wider interpretation of words for the body, such as you suggested, Grant. Thanks for that question.
John?
I think you may have just addressed this kaupapa researchers, or some older researchers often come to me and say, hey, doing slices of rat brain, this is no relevance to Māori. How would you answer that? I know how I approach it, probably similar to what you just done, but how would you approach a question such as that?
I would say that mātauranga is hugely valued in Te Reo Māori knowledge, quest for knowledge. We're very proud of our knowledge. We're proud of the knowledge I tuku iho that has been handed down, and we are proud of the knowledge Matariki nei in the future. And so working with Ngā tamariki o Tāne Mahuta, the offspring of Tāne Mahuta, who has governorship over all kinds of animals, such as rats. As long as we approach that with the appropriate level of respect, and if it is about progressing the health of our mokopuna, our grandchildren to go forward, then that can align with a Māori worldview, because we always prioritise the health of our family. It is number one. And so, as I say, so long as the protocols, the karakia are in place, we are able to engage with activities such as science and the use of animals and things to achieve our wellness and our health. It is not outside, in my view, the Māori worldview in the quest of knowledge for our mokopuna. So thank you.
I had one more question to kind of go back to the kōrero at the beginning. You talked about briefly how you learned Māori, at what point in your life. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Oh, hunter-gatherer, and I remember when I first started to learn, I was so excited, and I set about learning. I would learn sentences that would give good bang for buck. So you want a sentence to start off like, where is, kei here. So, because all you've got to do, it's like math, 1 and 1 is 2, and you use the same structure, but you punch in different values. So, kei here, so where is, so you would say the car, or the dog, or the kitchen, or the food. But you're only changing the end word. And I sat at a table with some kaumātua, and I wanted to impress them. And so I just kept saying, oh, kei here, te kai. And they, for the first few times, I felt I was participating in the kōrero, and they were beautiful speakers. But I kept butting in with these wee things. And because at the end of it, I thought that I'd said a lot of things in Māori, but it was the same sentence. There were a few non-Māori in the group who thought I was really flourishing, and they were really super impressed with me. But eventually the kaumātua were sort of looking at me through their hands like this, because they knew what I was doing. I was just I was so excited, and I asked, where is the kitchen, where is the food, and where are the the cars parked, and so on and so on and so on. And people were very patient with me, but they understood. So what I would say is to just latch on to some everyday sentences, and then you'll get a buzz out of being able to say them. And you might have to talk to the fridge or the dog or the cat, just to share what you're learning. And you've just got to be patient. But you've got to sort of be able to see the fun in it, I mean, I can look at a science paper now and I just see it as another language, and I'm completely blown away by it. But I can also say to myself, if I was starting out as a young person, I could be extremely captivated by the challenge of that. And yeah, I might start off learning the table of ions. I don't know how I would start in brain health, but I would just progress with acquiring more and more, So you've got to kind of find a way to engage in it that's sort of fun and can build your efficacy that you can achieve it. And don't be overwhelmed by the dictionary. Never get a Māori dictionary. Actually, you do need a Māori dictionary, but don't be overwhelmed by it. Just make a humble beginning and work out. I mean, if we look at children in a shop, they're only 3 years old, but they know how to say, where is the ice cream?
Things, yes.
They can get their messages across. So you don't have to be thinking broadly when you start out. Make a simplistic start, but never give up. just like science probably.
Thank you. No, a great point for someone who's on my journey in Te Reo Māori. I can't wait to implement that.
Ka whai, never give up, Courtney.
We have an old saying too, line upon line, precept upon precept,
Ka whai, Grant.
which is
Thank you.
a kind of Middle Eastern version of the Maori kaupapa.
Ka whai.
Were there any other questions or comments from the crowd? No? Okay, so with that, we might wrap it up and say thank you very much, Ngā Peter, for your kōrero. Kind of incredibly valuable. And with that, we have a small token of appreciation from the BHRC that I'd like to present to you.
Oh,
So this is
thank you.
from-
Thank you very much. Nā mihi nui ki a koutou. Tino hu Māori e tanāko ki te noho. Ki wainganui koutou ki raro te tuanui o Rukutia. Ko tōko nei tūmanāko. Ka tae e koutou te tīmata i tō koutou huarahi reo Māori. Hei whai te hua o tērā kaupapa a Muriaki nei. Nō reira, rauraka tērā mā, kaimanaki mā, nā mihi nui ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora.